Hey there, welcome to my channel. In this video, we're going to talk about DNA vs. ATP. So which one still confuses you most? Is it DNA or is it ATP? Well, let me know in the comments below. I'm your instructor from an academy, and in this video, we're going to do a review of some important concepts related to DNA and to ATP. So if you're ready, let's go. First things first, what is DNA and what is ATP? So DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. It's a molecule that carries genetic instructions used in the growth, development, functioning, and reproduction of all known living organisms and many viruses. The main role of DNA is to hold our genetic information in the form of genes. These genes are like little instruction manuals that tell our bodies how to build and maintain themselves. So every single one of your cells has a nucleus, right? And inside the nucleus you have these structures called chromosomes, which are made of DNA. In humans, we have 23 pairs of chromosomes, so 46 total, and each chromosome contains many different genes. Now, DNA is like a twisted ladder. That's called a double helix, right? And the sides of the ladder are made of alternating sugar and phosphate molecules, while the rungs of the ladder are made of pairs of nitrogenous bases. There are 4 different bases, adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine, which pair up with each other in a specific way. So adenine always pairs with thymine, and guanine always pairs with cytosine. And now ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. It's a molecule that serves as the primary energy currency of all living cells. So ATP is kind of like the energy currency of our cells. Now, the main function of ATP is to provide energy for cellular processes such as muscle contraction, nerve impulse transmission, biosynthesis, cell division, and active transport. So basically, any process that requires energy in the body uses ATP. So cells can make ATP by breaking down nutrients in the presence of oxygen in a process called cellular respiration. ATP is like a rechargeable battery, right? It can be recharged by adding a phosphate group to it, which requires energy, or it can be discharged by removing a phosphate group, which releases energy. So the amount of energy in a system is measured in units called joules, but in biology we use a different unit called calories. 1 calorie is equal to 4 joules, and ATP has 3 phosphate groups attached to it, and it stores about 7.3 kilocalories per mole. Now, if you look at the structure of ATP, you'll notice that it's similar to a nucleotide. In fact, it's actually a nucleoside triphosphate, and a nucleotide is the building block of nucleic acids like DNA and RNA. So nucleotides consist of a nitrogenous base, a 5-carbon sugar, and 1 or more phosphate groups. ATP is actually a nucleotide, but instead of being used to store genetic information, it's used to store energy. Okay, so we talked about what DNA is and we talked about what ATP is. Now, let's compare them side by side. Let's talk about their chemical structure, their function, and then we'll talk about some similarities and differences between the two. So we already talked about the chemical structure of both of these molecules, but let's take a closer look at the structure of DNA. Like I said, it's a double helix, right? And this shape allows for DNA to be very compact, which is important because it allows it to fit into the nucleus of the cell without getting tangled up. Also, the double helix is very stable, which protects the genetic information from being damaged. However, this stability also makes it difficult for DNA to replicate quickly, which is a problem when cells need to divide quickly. So sometimes DNA needs to unwind itself in order for the cell to do things like replication or transcription. As for ATP, its structure is a lot simpler than DNA, right? It's just a single molecule. Its structure is a lot less stable, but that's actually good because it makes it easier for cells to break down ATP and use the energy to power various processes. All right, now let's talk about the function of DNA and ATP. So we talked about the fact that DNA holds our genetic information, and the genes along the DNA molecule provide the instructions for building proteins, which carry out many important functions in the body. So DNA also plays a critical role in cell division, right? During cell division, the DNA must be replicated accurately so that each daughter cell receives a complete set of chromosomes. Any errors during this process can lead to mutations, which can cause cancer or other diseases. And ATP, like I said, it's the primary energy currency of the cell, right? So it provides the energy that cells need to carry out all of their processes. Without ATP, cells wouldn't be able to contract, they couldn't transmit nerve impulses, they couldn't synthesize new molecules, and they couldn't move substances across cell membranes against their concentration gradients. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about are some of the similarities and differences between these two molecules. So first of all, I want to talk about their chemical composition. So both DNA and ATP are made up of smaller building blocks, right? DNA is made up of nucleotides, and ATP is also made up of a nucleotide. In addition, both molecules contain phosphate groups, and they both have a 5-carbon sugar. Another similarity between these two molecules is that they both store energy. So ATP obviously stores energy that can be used by the cell, but DNA also stores energy in the form of chemical bonds between the nitrogenous bases. This energy is released when the bonds are broken, and it's used for things like DNA replication and transcription. However, there are also some important differences between the two molecules. First of all, DNA is a much larger molecule than ATP. DNA can be thousands of nucleotides long, while ATP is just a single molecule. Second, DNA is a double helix, whereas ATP is a single strand. And third, the function of these two molecules is quite different. DNA stores genetic information, whereas ATP stores energy. Now let's move on to the next big question. What happens when either one of these molecules is no longer functioning properly? So problems with DNA can lead to a wide range of issues, including genetic disorders, cancer, and other diseases. For example, mutations in DNA can change the structure of proteins, which can lead to a loss of function or even harmful new function. This can happen spontaneously, or it can be caused by environmental factors such as UV radiation or certain chemicals. Cancer is also associated with mutations in DNA that control cell growth and division. And as for ATP, if ATP is no longer functioning properly, cells won't be able to carry out essential processes. This can lead to cell death. Some diseases have been linked to problems with ATP production, including mitochondrial disorders, which are caused by mutations in the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, where most ATP is produced. Finally, let's discuss how the study of DNA and ATP has advanced our understanding of biology and medicine. By understanding how DNA works, we've been able to develop treatments for genetic disorders, right? We've also been able to use DNA fingerprinting to identify individuals for things like paternity testing and forensic science. And in the future, gene therapy may allow us to correct genetic defects by replacing faulty genes with healthy ones. As for ATP, our understanding of how ATP works has allowed us to develop drugs that target specific metabolic pathways and increase ATP production. This could be useful for treating mitochondrial disorders and other diseases that result in low levels of ATP. Okay, so I hope that this video helped to clarify some of the confusion that you might have between DNA and ATP. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave me a like and a comment down below, and remember, you can find all of the notes and study guides for this course in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.